I'm going to introduce our topic for tonight. And Mike is showing off that. If you saw that quick background, that was a lovely drone shot of Lake or Horseshoe Lake in our town. He's got a drone, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, there it is. There it is. There it is. Okay. All right. So back to our presentation. So this is a part 2, but it's kind of stands on itself a little bit if you're familiar with Van and universe building. But this is to really hone in on using a lot of the some best practices, but these are not the only practices. These are, Mike's going to explain a lot of it, but just keep in mind, none of this is guaranteed, and it is not the only way to do things. So Mike Morrow, thank you very much for your putting this together. The slides have been made available ahead of time to a few people who have asked, who are following along. And other than that, why don't you kick it off, okay?
Sure. There will be updated versions of the slides. So as I went through it one more time, I picked out all the things I should have picked out earlier. You'll see good slides here, but I'll have to send it out again so that folks can get a better copy. All right. So for today, our discussion topic is using tiers to target voters. Let's see. Let's make that a little bigger. All right, let's jump right in. Disclaimers. This is for discussion purposes. There is no single best way to do this. Please share what you do. As I've said, there's 39 towns in Morris County, and which means there's 45 different ways of doing this. And for this, there's probably even more. The goal always to keep in mind is to contact the voters in person, texting, phone banking, lit drops, etc. And that requires messaging. So that's the thing you always have to focus on. This will help get you there, but it's the messaging that's key. All of the numbers in this presentation are accessible. You could either get stuff off the Morris County election site, queries in Van, or things that were typed into Excel. So nothing fancy. It's all doable by anybody. And then the strategies proposed here are totally hypothetical. In Roxbury, we haven't even talked strategy yet. So these are just really to illustrate, what you can do. It isn't what somebody is actually doing. Good so far? Some quick definitions. Win number, right, is the number of votes you'll need to win the election. Snarkily, it's, 50% of the expected turnout plus 1. In the previous week's presentation, we demonstrated different ways to get win number. Goal number it's the turnout to aim for on your way to the win number. So it could be a larger goal, such as tiers or even the election itself, or smaller, like age or gender as an interim target. You'll hear me mention unwalkables. Those are houses that are unreachable or houses that are not safe to canvass. Roxbury's out past where, you don't even see Jersey barriers anymore. So we do have streets that are windy, that maybe only have sidewalks on one side of the street and maybe not on any side of the street. And so I've taken to cataloging those, about 60% of the town, I think I have. So that we can kind of take them out of some of our canvassing equations. And adjustment, which goes up with goal and win number, is how you adjust the expected turnout to account for factors that might affect turnout, such as popular or unpopular candidate, school board, or a particular issue. Good so far? All right, now for the fun. So I touched upon this briefly last week. Targeting support. I've seen it referred to as a targeting support matrix. What you want to do is separate those who always vote, and they voted in all general elections that they were eligible to vote in. So if they were eligible to vote in 4, they voted in 4, 3 and 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. Sometimes vote is they voted in 2 or 3 out of the 4, and then rarely is 0 or 1. So you have, for Dems, those that always vote are what we call tier 1. That's your base voters. That's where you get your volunteers. That's where you get money. That's where you get, those are your dedicated voters. Dems who sometimes vote are your get out the vote. You got to get them out the door. They're already lean your way. They already agree with you. It's a question of getting them out to the polls. Tier 3, they rarely vote. Unless you really need to get into that tier, I wouldn't. It would take a lot to get them out, and that time could be better spent somewhere else.
I just want to say real quick, that's often the part of the base or of the voter block that only votes in presidential elections, and even then, they don't always vote.
Yeah, well, we'll go over the years in a sec. For unaffiliated, tier 4 are those that always vote, right? What you want to do, you don't have to try to get them out to vote. You just have to get them to vote for your candidate. And then tier 5 are unaffiliated who sometimes vote. Not only do you have to get them out, you got to get them to vote for your candidate. And tier 6, same as tier 3, not really worth paying attention to. They rarely vote, and they're not necessarily aligned with you. So are we cool on the tiers? All right. For our example, we'll use Roxbury. Roxbury is 4 wards. This year we have a ward by ward election, 1 for each ward. So for this example, we'll use just Ward 4. So they have about 4,900 registered voters. If you were listening last week, we had a win number that was a little lower, but have adjusted it up to 1,100. And I don't know if folks have been looking at Van the last couple of weeks, but unaffiliated have begun to become affiliated. So in Roxbury, we had about 50 go toward Republicans in Ward 4 and 10 toward Democrats. So let me do another caveat on this. You'll notice that if you try to compare numbers on one slide to another slide, they may not match. That's because I ran the queries on different days, and depending on when Van was updated, you'll see that some of the numbers are a little different. Don't let it throw you. It's a little different. So what that means in terms of tiers, right? For Democrats, that's 574 for tier 1, 349, and then we don't care about the. So the reason I have the tier 2 and the tier 5. So for unaffiliated, it's tier 4 and 5. So tier 2 and tier 5, those are the ones that we're going to want to canvass, right? If tier 1 are going to come out no matter what, and tier 4 are going to come out no matter what, we probably want to start focusing on 2 and 5. We don't want to not communicate with the others, but we probably want to focus on 2 and 5, and we'll see examples of that further down. Oh, what's the? Oh, here we go. So tier 1. So we'll go through the tiers. Tier 1 are Dems who always vote. Now, the first thing to notice is the years I used. Now, when I first got involved, the theory was you use just even years. So in this case, it would be 2016, 18, 20, and 22. But since 2016 is so long ago, and 2021 had a governor's race, I think there's consistency if I use the 4 out of the last 5 years. So I'm willing to trade out 2016 in favor of 2021. Does that make sense? Now, there are those who will trade out 2018 for 2019. So it's basically the last 4 years. I don't like that because 2019 is a down year. So to me, it's not consistent, but be aware there's others who will use that. Good so far? No questions yet? It's a discussion. Any questions, comments, anything you want to? So the all 4 was easy. And that's what I did last go round. It wasn't until Dave mentioned using, well, what about those who were only eligible for 3 and they voted in all of them? Shouldn't they count? Like, really? Yes, they should. So here you go. So if they were registered, and you can use the day after the election and the day of the election. I'm too lazy, so I picked a point. But you can make this more granular. I don't think there was an immediate rush for people to register 10 days after an election. So it was pretty safe to use this range. But if you really want to get super deluxe accurate, you can use the day after the election of 2018 and then the day of the election in 2020. Same for 2 and then same for 1. So 4, 3, 2, and 1. And that's our tier 1. Good so far? Now, the way this would look in Van, is that coming? Can people see this? I want to make sure this is.
If you can make it a little bit bigger, I would, if possible. There you go. Make it one more. You do one. There you go.
Good there? Okay. All right. So step 1, Democrat, 2018 voted. Yeah, it's a little out of order, but 2018, 20, 21, and 22. If you notice in each step, I just leave it at County Morris. This way, it's in the last step that I say Roxbury Ward 4. This way I can run this query for any town, and I just have to change the last step. So if you see how it just says Morris. So step 2, 20, 21, 22, and then you put the registration date here. Step 3, 20, 21, 22, registration date. Step 4, just 22, and registration date here. And then it's step 5 that I put Roxbury Ward 4. Like I said, this way you can use the same query. You don't have to have 20 queries. You could just change this in step 5 anytime you want to do, if I wanted to do Ward 3 or Ward 2 or a different town or whatever. Tier 2, right? It's 2 or 3 out of the 4. So you do 3 out of 4 for those years, 2 out of 4. But you have to make sure you remove those who voted in all 3 and had the same registration dates in tier 1. Basically, you want to make sure the ones that were in tier 1 were promoted from tier 2. So you got to make sure you take them out of tier 2. Does that make sense? So you remove the all 3 and you remove the all 2 because they moved up to tier 1. And again, we don't have to go through every single step here, but basically 3 out of the 4, 2 out of the 4, and then here's where you remove those that you had put in tier 1. You remove those that you would put in tier 1. And then
Can I have you pause real quick?
Sure.
I just want to make sure those folks who are on this, who are familiar with creating lists in Van and this, the searches, is everybody aware of how to remove and add people?
No.
Okay.
Oh.
So these are steps when you're in Van that you can see where you can have a plus where it says to add a step. And part of that is it'll then bring up a little pop-up to add people or remove people. There's other options as well, but that's part of when you're creating you're building your search and you're going to add a step. That's where you would add or remove people.
Add a step. You have a choice
Yeah,
to
see
add,
right
remove. Narrow is a handy one. I don't know what
But
narrow by sample
don't
is.
get into narrow right now. Right,
but
that's
add and remove.
Jim, do you see where that would be in Van?
I don't. I'm looking at the screen you have up, right?
Yes,
Yes.
right now he's showing, he changed from his slide and
This
he's
is
now
going to
showing
add
when you're
people
in
and
Vote
remove
Builder.
He's going between add people and remove people, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's showing the process in Vote Builder.
Uh-huh.
So that's how you would remove people. So instead of putting a step that adds people, you have a step that takes them out.
Mhm.
Okay,
Vault Builder, the database program for Van or what?
yes,
Well, Vault-
Vote Builder is the application that accesses the database.
Okay, good.
Heather is asking in the chat, the list for tier 1 and the list for tier 2 are both unique and independent lists, correct?
Correct. There should not be, if I did it right, there should not be anybody in tier 1 that is in tier 2. They should all be independent, and then they're all independent of 4, 5, and 6. Yeah, there should be no overlap between any of the tiers. All right, and tier 3, rarely vote, 0 or 1 out of 4. So it's 0 out of 4, 1 out of 4, and then remove those who voted in the only one they could vote in up in tier 1. And so same thing. No more than 1, right? Covers your 0 and 1, and then remove those that were exactly 1 within that date range because they're in tier 1 now. And last step, Roxbury. Good so far? All right. Oh, for tiers 4, 5, and 6 are the same as this, only the party is unaffiliated. I have those in the appendix. So when you get the slide deck, you'll see them in the appendix. But it's exactly the same way, only we use unaffiliated instead of Democrat.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. This is from Cheryl, who isn't, her mic isn't even working.
Tell her to speak
so-
up. No, just kidding.
Is there any possibility you could make us a tier 1 universe for Morris County that we could just use as a starting place?
Sure, why not? Save the list where you could get at it.
So
I
that
don't-
is something that if we think that would be helpful, we could, definitely create that and make that a search that is shared, can be shared with other people in the county, in Morris County at least.
Yeah, I'd rather say share a search than a list because
Right,
the list
share
would
a
have to
search.
be constantly updated. So given a choice, and I do have these generic searches, so we could put it in a folder that we then make accessible.
That make accessible to others. Absolutely, if that would help people. There's another question from Tammy to just make sure that we are clarifying that this is being done in the My Voters part of Vote
Yes.
Builder and not the My Campaign part.
Is there, if then else logic in the Van?
It's there isn't straight out if then else. You would kind of have to think it out and then kind of maneuver around to get the result you want. But there's no direct if then else.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wish.
It's not explicitly laid out on in the application as such.
But you get
It's-
one set, when you ask the first query,
Right,
operate on that set and have a second query, which narrows it down into a second set, and then you can operate, they could go 3 levels like that. In other words, you could set up a query on a database, which yields a result. Then you do another query on the result,
yes,
yield a further result.
yes.
Hold that thought. That's coming up. All right, so hold that thought. I will show you how to do something like that. And that deals with the unwalkables and something I call tier 7. Tier 7 is basically Republicans that vote all the time. Right? If tier 1 is Democrats that vote all the time and tier 4 are unaffiliated that vote all the time, tier 7 is Republicans that vote all the time. But we'll hit that. All right, so now we've done tiers. All right, so what can we use them for? First is goals, which we talked about last week. I'll touch on it briefly here. And then I do strategy and budgeting strategy, because one will drive the other while the other drives the other. Sometimes you build a strategy, you find out that you can't afford it, and that drives your strategy. So I have them as both. All right, goals. Right. First of all, why goals? Well, used to achieve the win number. Right. It allows you to work on improving specific categories like age and gender. You can improve your foundational support. And then within goals, you have targets, right? You can have your targets: tier, gender, age, maybe ward and precinct. You know, we get into that in Roxbury because that's kind of how we're set up, but doesn't mean other towns can't do it that way either. Good so far? So if you remember this from last week, it's Roxbury, Ward 4, so tier 1, our goal is 100%, gives us 579, 55% for tier 2, 4% for tier 3. Now, when you're first trying to put your goals together, it's kind of tough to say, well, how should we count unaffiliateds? Right, because you don't get all of them. So I say start with 50%. And George pointed out earlier today that, yeah, one of your goals is to increase that, is so that more unaffiliateds come out voting for your candidate than voting for the other candidate. So you don't want it to be 50% throughout the campaign, otherwise they cancel each other out. But for at least the start, as you're trying to set your goals in that, leave it at 50%, and then you can go up or down or that. If you're in Mountain Lakes, it's they're a machine there. It's like 80%, but most other towns don't have that. So I would start at 50%. Good so far? Now, one thing I did, I'd rather do this. So I'm gonna switch these on the fly. So what you can do to help get your goal number is start breaking down your tier. So I'm using tier 2 and tier 5. And I'm saying, okay, let's set a goal for tier 2. So we want 60% turnout for women. And if we do that, we only need 33% men, because our tier 2 goal was 175. And if we get 60% women, 33% men, we get almost that, 169. So we just about hit it. Tier 5, if we say 50% turnout for women, and again, if we do that, then we only need 33% men, we get 100, right? Our goal was 96. So you could start thinking, all right, I'll do it by, gender, because if you look here in tier 2, right, it's 50% more women than men. So why not target them? You're going to get a better hit. You're going to get a better turnout if you start hitting women, maybe, as opposed to men. You could do age. Right here, it's quite a lot. So instead of maybe women in tier 5, maybe age is where you go for. But it's once you tier and start, segmenting the data, that you can see this. And now I have this next slide for those that haven't used crosstabs within Van. So if I ran the tier 2 query and then use crosstabs, all I need to do is up here put the gender, here put the age, and here's the results. And literally you can copy this and paste it into your spreadsheet. You got to do paste special in Unicode, I think, but you could do that. So you don't have, I know the crosstabs gives you the ability to export to Excel, but you don't even have to do that. You just copy and paste right off the screen. So for those who aren't into crosstabs, I suggest play with it. Yeah, it's really cool once you get the hang of it.
Can you copy into a relational database?
You could, like Microsoft Access, let's say, or you copy it into your spreadsheet, then import that into your database.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Could definitely do that.
Mike, one other good reason to target having a higher turnout percentage for women than for men is particularly for unaffiliateds. The women are more likely to vote for us than the men. So that'll help increase that 50% initial
Right.
assumption to something higher.
Yes, because that
Exactly.
tends to be a consistent break. It doesn't matter what town you're in, right? That's statistically how things go.
So we good on goals? So how tiering can help with setting goals and achieving goals. Next is strategy and budgeting. Right. So I went through, looked at a bunch of ways that you could use to communicate to voters. There are more than this, but these are the ones that I'm using for this exercise and other. So I'm saying, okay, for this example, we're going to propose a strategy that we're going to have 3 points of contact for each tier. So some combination of these three, of these 7, 3 of them are going to hit each tier. So tiers 1, 2, 4, and 5. Remember, we're not going to pay attention to tiers 3 and 6. Good so far? So let's
This is
start.
a goal. This
I'm
is a
sorry?
goal to go back and review, right? This lesson you're giving is available to go back and review.
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go fast enough that we get done at a reasonable hour, but slow
Yes.
enough that people can ask questions.
So yes, this video, you can request it if you don't have the link to the Morris County. I'm going to put the link in the chat to the Morris County Democrats YouTube channel. The video will be uploaded there, hopefully within a week of today, because we have to edit it. We want to make sure everything is included and it's all cleaned up, and then it takes a bit to upload it. But and then the updated slides, if we make any changes to it, they can also be emailed, available upon request if you are not on Facebook and in the Vandals Facebook page, because they are uploaded to that as well. Okay, so you can get copies or links for all of that, okay?
Thank you.
All right. So for canvassing, we'll start there. Items to consider. Now, as you look at these numbers, they're for demonstration purposes only. I don't know how many contacts you can get per hour. I read this somewhere, so this might be somewhat accurate, but folks are going to have to use their own experience to get really accurate numbers. In fact, you might not do 3-hour shifts. You might do 2-hour shifts. But for the purposes of displaying this, of demonstrating this, I'm saying that a volunteer in a given hour could do 15 doors, of which they will talk to 6 people with a 3-hour shift. And then for that shift, you're going to have 2 people, one to canvass and one to drive. That's kind of how we do it in Roxbury. It doesn't have to be that way. Not everybody has a driver, but for this purpose, we're saying one to canvass, one to drive. And we're going to canvass tier 2. So those are the Democrats that don't vote all the time.
Mike,
Sure.
sorry to interrupt.
No, please,
I
please.
think
It's a
that
discussion. Go for it.
Driving. Yes, no, I think I would identify driving canvases in rural areas. You know, in a more like suburban setting where you have like gridded streets, you know, Boot and Parsippany, Morris Township.
I think that also means if you have sidewalks.
Yes.
If you have sidewalks, yeah.
Sidewalks are big.
Yeah, that's a big thing. We don't have a lot of
That-
sidewalks here.
Yeah, so you know, you have 2 canvassers, and I always recommend going out with a partner. I'm not a real fan of sending somebody out by themselves. I think you should always have a partner with you. But I would just say, you know, for rural canvases versus more suburban canvases, right?
Yeah. I think we can definitely put that in. We can add some little contextual language to this slide that explains that.
Yeah. Since this is going to be uploaded, I think it's important for context so that somebody that's new to it is not going to think that like they're going to, you know, drive through the streets of Denville with somebody dropping them off.
Right. I think we can
But anyway.
definitely add a little notation on this slide to that effect.
You're taking notes, right?
Yes, I am.
So we're going to canvass tier 2, which is Democrats who don't vote all the time, but we're going to remove the unwalkables. I think now we should probably talk about unwalkables. Where are we? 23. Okay, yes. So unwalkables are houses that are either not safe or you just can't get to. Maybe it's a condo development. They don't let people in.
Big dogs.
Or big dogs.
Actually, that might also relate to certain gated communities
Mhm.
that you simply can't access as well. You know,
So-
there are some condo developments, apartments and so on, and there's some, you can't go in there. That would be an unwalkable as well.
So we have some streets here, one of which is Hillside. And sometimes the sidewalk's on one side of the street and sometimes it's on the other. But for the sidewalks, the side of the street where the sidewalks aren't, I don't feel good creating a turf for people to canvass. Say, no, not worth it. Let's mail them, let's mail them postcards. We have other ways to contact them. So within Van, you could use the address tab to indicate, and it's a different one for each step. So it's a very tedious process, but it's a process you only need to do once, because it's not like they're going to lay a bunch of sidewalks in a week. If you get a new development, then you kind of have to add from there. So it's a lot of work to do up front, but once you've done it, it's done. And you just run it. It's for all parties, right? You don't care the party affiliation of the person in the house. You care about the house. Does that make sense? So like from here, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mike. So this is something I had a question about when I was
Yeah.
looking at the deck earlier that Ann sent to me. So you set up this list in Van. I didn't understand that. I thought it was like an Excel file or something that you feed in. But
No.
you create a list in Van through this, as you described. It looks like a tedious process.
Yes.
Do you save it as a static list, or do you save it
Yes.
as
I save it as a static list, and
Okay.
then just I'll point out one thing here. If you notice on Hillside, it's from street number 50, house number 54 to 74, and I could do even only because it's on one side of the street. Now I use Google Maps. I use the satellite because if there's one house that you can get to because their driveway is on the side street, I don't call that unwalkable because you can get to it, and I could build that in the turf. But you put this together, you save it as a list, and then in the last step of your query, you use the householding query. I didn't even know this existed till like October when I first got involved. So it was way late in the game. I wish I had known this earlier. One of my goals this time around is to make our canvassing more efficient so we can hit more houses with the same amount of people.
Question,
Sure.
aren't there more likely to be proportionally more Democratic voters, renters in apartment buildings than in private houses? So if we forego those, aren't we foregoing a possible source of Democratic votes?
Well, you're foregoing the canvassing because in the apartment case, you might not be able to get in there, right? The door is probably locked. But remember, we said up front is that we were going to use 3 methods of contact, right? So we won't use canvas for, let's say, the people in the apartment, but we could use predictive dialing. We could use text banking. We could use postcards.
Or other mailers. Right.
Or other mailers.
You call into the building and get someone and get in the building and hit other apartments while you're in the building.
That's a really precise thing. There is that, argument that if you know somebody who resides there, they can help, right? But I think to have as a general practice, no campaign should assume that they can access an otherwise inaccessible building. That's a nice to have if somebody offers or can be asked to do so.
And if you live in a building that you know is locked and some stranger knocks on your door, we're trying to also limit the number of potential bad experiences our canvassers might have. So that would be a team decision. I wouldn't do it, but it's everybody has their own way of doing things. But to remove the unwalkables, right? It's the householding function. So remove any person with a voting address in a saved list, folder, unwalkable. So James, you had mentioned, saving something and then using it later. So I saved a list called, everything starts with MN for me, unwalkable. And so what this step does, it bumps the results that you have in your query against this list and just throws out anybody that's in that list. So by virtue of that, I'm not going to send canvassers to either a dangerous house or a house they otherwise couldn't get in. Does that make sense?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Is that Janine?
It is Janine.
Hey.
Hey, I just have a question about the no sidewalk thing. I'm a little baffled here because in Landing, we would be missing like most of the houses. I'm just.
Well, it's not just no sidewalks on a busy street. Like what's that road that goes by the doctor?
It would be like Lakeside Boulevard or Howard Boulevard.
Yeah, those.
Mount Arlington and going up to Mount Arlington.
Okay,
But-
yeah.
but there are roads-
They've never been removed before, as far as I know. So I was just surprised at that.
Oh no, we had certain houses. We had certain houses that were off limits in Landing last time.
Okay.
And then there's the ones along the lake that don't have sidewalks, but they're nice, quiet roads. Yeah, there's no issue going on them, so that's fine.
Oh,
But-
okay.
But like Lakeside Boulevard, I don't even like driving on it. You're driving, you're stopping, you're driving, you're stopping, you're driving, you're stopping.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, a question
Sure.
about your unwalkable. It's a hard list right now, but do you occasionally go through and touch canvas status for like inaccessible being added during the canvassing season?
I see what you're saying. I'll update the query just because things change. Yeah, as we find out about things, yes, then
Yeah.
update it. Like I say, I have 60% of the town, so there are parts that I have to add to it, and it's either I'm going to figure it out or somebody's going to tell me because oops, looked accessible to me.
Okay, no, it's not geographic. It's maybe inaccessible just because, or depending on how much data you have, or the people who have refused or hostile or what have you also have them off the list for canvassing.
That's when it's hostile or when they have a dog. That's when it's based on the voter, not the address.
Yeah.
There's two different ways to be there's inaccessible and unwalkable. The inaccessible tends to be other things, like if a house is under construction, right? And it's literally not safe for anybody to walk there.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it won't be safe and fixed by the next election cycle.
Yeah,
But some streets just will never be walkable.
Right.
That's where we try to, at least that's kind of the level of detail that when we were really trying to make sure we canvassed, as effectively as possible, we were trying to distinguish between those two types of, we
Okay.
can't get to that house.
All right, that's unwalkables, and now we'll do remove for tier 5. We remove houses with tier 7, so that's Republicans that vote all the time. And I chose Mel's north of 40. People could choose whatever they want. I think that's our sweet spot for having a less than desirable experience should the wrong person answer the door.
I'd like to just mention one more thing here when we're talking about communicating with voters through canvassing. A lot has changed since the last election cycle. There is a wariness about going to doors that you don't know, because we've heard of some of these terribly tragic incidences in the country where people have made the mistake of knocking on the door of somebody who didn't want to have their door knocked on. And so I'm not trying to scare people, but just recognize if you have canvassers who are working with your campaign who have those concerns, there's different ways. They should be canvassing only certain people in certain parts of your universe, if that's the case, because you just don't want to risk anybody feeling unsafe when they're doing this.
When you're, that's a good idea. When you are these separate, one record per voter?
When
Well,
you're
but-
using householding is the only function in vote, what did we call it? Yeah, in the My Voter part of Van that deals with the house.
Oh, okay.
All the voters in that household
Yes.
based on that single address.
So
That's called householding.
is
or
that
household.
is that a match on address, or is it
Yes,
a confirmed?
Yes.
Because you could have a number of people in a building, in different units in the building,
apartment buildings are different because they tend to have units.
Yeah,
right?
the address would include the unit. It wouldn't just
Right.
be 123 Main Street.
Sometimes they don't give their unit. Sometimes you have people in different apartments, therefore with the same address, because they don't give their units.
I
That'd be-
actually think that legally, that would be hard.
Yeah, since
'Cause
this is voter data,
this
I
is
can't
voter data. It's a
imagine
little
it's
different.
not included in,
Yeah, it would be hard because, for example, if they were to be mailed ballots or voter information, the county and the state has to be able to reach them.
Okay,
So I do know I know of instances that you're talking about, but I don't think those are the addresses that we see for people. By and large, there are always exceptions. I don't believe that those are the addresses we see on the voter, like the voter within the voter database.
how do you distinguish between two John Smiths? One is strictly should be junior, but he doesn't want to use, people will use the version of their name they want to use.
This is
Well,
again, we're going by the legal name that they use for when they vote.
So
and
you-
and they have
But
a
you can-
voter
can't you look-
ID. They've been
Yeah, and
assigned a
can't you
voter
look
ID by the
also-
county.
okay.
Can't
Right,
you
there's
also
a
look at their
unique
voter
code for them.
registration?
Right.
So that's a
Yes.
unique
You can look at the
key.
voter registration, and then also in that block, I forget which one it's called, but it gives you the voter data. It's on the right-hand side of your
Yes,
of
it's
your
the
screen,
voters to,
And-
yeah.
and it'll tell you when they were born. So you can rule that out right away. If
Right.
you've got two John Smiths, you just
Right.
look at their
Okay.
age, like we'll look
Right.
at their birth date.
And for
Right.
And
van
also-
purposes, they have
also
different
the-
voter IDs.
And they not only have separate voter IDs, but they also, their ages are going to be listed on a canvassing turf that's loaded into Van.
Yes.
And you can be pretty sure that there's not a duplicate record error. In other words, two persons with the same voter ID, that can't happen.
There won't be two voters with the same voter ID. There have been instances, and we have reported a few in Roxbury, so other towns may have run into this, where we've run into voters that spell their name a little differently. They have two voter IDs and they are the same person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have identified, I want to say I could count them on one hand per election cycle, and we always notify the county.
So if that
I
error
do
would
the same.
occur,
Yeah.
wouldn't be it wouldn't be
No.
statistically significant.
No, if I'm talking about, up to 5 people, and that's a lot. I don't even think it's ever been more than 3, really. In our voter universe of 10,000 voters, I don't think it's a lot.
Okay.
But
So
you'll figure it out when you go through it. If you bump into that on the very random chance you do,
okay,
yeah, it's pretty noticeable.
yeah. It's just one of the standards of setting up a relational database that it has to be an absolutely unique ID.
Yes, and here's another thing is that when you're in Vote Builder, which accesses Van, there's actually going to be 2 voter ID fields. One is the one given by the state, And that's what they would use. That's on their ballot. That's what identifies them to the Board of Elections for both the county and state level. But then there's actually a van ID. That's a unique qualifier that's just within Vote Builder that the county clerk doesn't even know about. And so you have those two fields. When you're looking to really determine between two people of the same name, a junior, senior, perhaps in the same household, they still will have different values in those two fields. That can be your sanity check.
Right, right.
All right. So we did canvassing. The next one is lit drop. You're going to use door hangers when a voter is not home. I said 75 cents. I actually have no idea how much they cost. Attempts per hour, right? They can, I'm saying here that they can hit 15 doors an hour. You know, your mileage may vary. 3 hours per shift. And you could change any of these numbers. You know, once you have it set up in Excel, you could change any number and just let it, you know, cascade out. Volunteers per shift, again, with the lit drop, one to do the lit drop, one to drive. And so we're going to lit drop tier 1. Remember, we're not canvassing tier 1, so we're going to lit drop tier 1 and remove the unwalkables, right? If we couldn't get to them canvassing, we can't get to them to do a lit drop. We'll lit drop tier 4, same thing, remove unwalkables and houses that have tier 7s. And then can't forget the lit drops in the 2 tiers that we did the canvassing in, because we're going to leave door hangers for houses where they didn't answer the door.
And this is where I'd like to bring it into, so it gets part of the recording and not lost in the chat. A lot of campaigns still are going to be using palm cards instead of the door hangers. We literally mean the door hangers. They're the printed palm card that's got the cutout so that people can leave it on the doorknobs, because you can't leave campaign literature in mailboxes and then it's hard to jam it somewhere. A tip that we have gotten from others and we are going to be using this year is send your canvas or your canvassing teams out with rolls of blue painter's tape or the green frog tape, but something that is you just tear off a little piece. You can hang up the campaign literature to any door, the storm door or the front door or the garage door. If they don't look like they're going to their front door, you can tape it onto, and so that's just a kind of a tip that you can turn anything into a door hanger if you have painter's tape.
And it won't damage whatever it is you're sticking it to.
Oh,
All right. Next is postcards. Some unit cost. I imagine it's something like that. We'll mail postcards to tier 2, right? That's our second point of contact for tier 2, right? We're also canvassing. Also to tier 4. But here's a little trick is we don't want to mail postcards to a tier 7 house because there's a really good chance it'll never make it into the house from the mailbox. It'll be torn up before it gets in the house. So for those houses, we'll use envelopes. We'll put whatever it is we're mailing in an envelope. Same with tier 5. So these are unaffiliated.
I
Tier
want
5.
to just say that
I'm sorry,
this is a strategy that not everybody would agree with or feel that is worth the time and cost. It's just a strategy tip, kind of like the painter's tape and the door hangers.
And of course, mail
Okay.
postcards to the unwalkables, right? We still have to have a point of contact with the unwalkables. If we're not going to canvass them, we have to replace that with another point of contact. And in this case, it's postcards.
And Mike, I have a question about the envelopes.
Yeah.
Is this something that you've used in Roxbury in the past?
We talked about it. Did we actually do it?
The only mailers we did in the 2021 was not, they were just, the big mailers or postcards. What we want to make sure we do going forward is institute this. This is one of the things that had been brought up in a Training Democrats session that I had gone to about how to reach, especially the hostile houses. But this, by the way, any type of mail was not recommended if the voter you're trying to reach in that household that might have a hostile are the young voters, because they don't read mail.
Just send them a text.
It would be texting or phone banking or trying to get your message out through social media platforms. So they're the only kind of voters that you're not going to waste a stamp on. That's another strategy point. But, you know, every campaign committee or, you know, committee that's trying to do voter outreach can figure out what they think is going to work best within their community. You know, your folks, you know, your town better, but those are just some best practices that have been recommended.
The envelope idea sounds very interesting to me, but there are some practical difficulties with the fact that you then have to have something to stuff in the envelope that will fit. It's
Right.
probably not going to be the same thing that you were using as a
It's probably
palm
not going to
card
be
or
the same
something.
thing. But the other thing is then it might reduce your cost for printing. You could do almost something that's like a really nice big bookmark. You could slip in a campaign magnet. You know what I mean? You can do a lot of things in in an envelope that you can't do otherwise.
Good point. Okay, thank you.
All right, and then envelopes, right, to any house that has the the tier 7s in it. Right, there's our way of communicating with them. Next is phone banks. Attempts per hour, 30. You know, your mileage may vary. And we're going to phone bank tier 1. Now, I was yelled at for only phone banking tier 1 because there's predictive dialer, which I didn't really know what predictive dialer was. I didn't realize it was just a faster way of dialing. I thought it did messages and all that stuff, but apparently it just dials things faster. So, and I did read somewhere about 150 attempts per hour. So I actually read that somewhere, but I've never done it. So I have no idea what you could actually do. So I'm saying, okay, let's say 40 contacts per hour then. And for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to predictive dial tiers 4 and 5.
So I want to just bring up a couple of points about the predictive dialer. This is something that the Morris County Dems is currently looking at doing is, and I think Margaret, you've probably heard this too, being talked about, is they're looking to get a contract with, there's some vendor that they're looking at to get like almost a Morris County wide contract to do predictive dialing. And I think text banking, I've heard something. And then each town or campaign would pay their like a fee that would be based on the number of calls that they would make for their purposes. But this way we would be able to have access without the startup fees, the startup cost, and a lot of those things that can add up quickly. And it would, I think from what I heard last from Adam and Shay, was they were looking at making that available throughout the county. So this is a very specific Morris County thing. Other counties in the state might be already doing this. I have no idea. So I can only speak to what Morris County has been talking about. And I can, you know, reach out to our county leadership and find out what the status is of that. Has anybody else heard that, by the way, or am I just dreaming?
I haven't heard it, but I haven't asked, and I have a meeting with Adam and Shay tomorrow.
Well, so that can be one of the things you ask about if
Right.
you'd like to, and let us know.
Yeah, I have heard it, Anne.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's the kind of thing that as we're all becoming much more effective in doing this kind of data, it makes it an easier sell for the county to say, look, we got all these groups that they're doing data crunching. They know who they're talking to. They're very effective and efficient. Then it's worth it to kind of get a bulk pricing that we can all take advantage of. So that's hopefully, so that I think will be part of both the predictive dialer and the text banking. The regular dialing is when you have to use your own phone, or you could do a Google phone. And Cheryl is actually pretty well versed in that, and she can talk about that if she could talk, but that might be it. Maybe that would be a separate, maybe that might be a separate, almost like a fact sheet or something that we could put together to share with people if you want to do, you know, an open phone bank through Van for free, but you have to use phones. We can, I don't know, Cheryl, maybe we can try to do a fact sheet on that to share with people to know how to use a Google phone voice
I
account
think
for
there
that.
was a lot of interest when I saw it going on in the Vandals, and Cheryl was trying to give the information, but I just thought, gee, we should make this much more available to lots of people, you know?
Right.
And
Ex-
why don't we add that to making a one-pager to the voter outreach committee?
Yeah, and we can do that as well. Right. All right.
Yeah.
I'm putting it in my notes, people. Thank you. All right, Mikey,
Okay.
continue.
All right, the last one is text bank. So again, 30 per volunteer, 10 contacts, and we'll do it with tier 1 and tier 2.
Yeah, that attempts per hour is pretty low for texting.
Is it okay?
Really, really, really.
No, that's good. That's because the beauty of it is, like I said, once you have it set up in Excel, you start changing some of the parameters. You can make it just cascade down as you find out more concretely how much things have cost or how fast you're able to do things.
It would help to know which voters had smartphones, because it's a waste if a voter does not have a smartphone. If you have a flip-top phone, problem is any information you put there can't be operated on. Like if you include URLs or anything in your message,
Oh, right. That's
can't do
true.
anything about it. Maybe they can read your message, but you can't really reply to it, or,
Right.
so it might be useful. I don't know how you know who has a smartphone.
I think that's something that when if that kind of event, phone banking or or text banking event is set up, it would be listed as here's the requirements of what you need.
Oh.
Right.
The
I
recipient
guess that,
would need
yeah.
a smartphone as
Right.
well. Recipient would need a smartphone.
Right. Now I do know that for large scale text banking, you do it on your computer or your tablet.
You can do
You
that.
just type it. You never even get out your phone.
Yeah,
But-
and I'll tell you something, I'm just gonna hop in here, and I know that Ellen was a whiz at the text banking for a
Yep.
couple of the campaigns, and it was so effective and so easy to do. And she'd
Yes.
sit down and do like 2 hours at the computer and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contacts, and it was really,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I believe that that's the direction that the county is looking at for being able to offer that. I know when the Morris County, when our VBM outreach team, we worked with the Young Democrats caucus, and they used a tool that did that. We
Yeah.
gave them the list of voters we wanted to reach out to. They set it up and they ran with it.
Yeah.
Now there is a cost incurred to that, and they covered the cost. I think it was maybe $100 or something to do that to the list we wanted of almost 1,000 people. But that was it. But there was no typing on a phone for that particular kind of way to do a text bank.
Go back. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Now, so, yeah, when Ellen did it, was all done on the computer, so it was very efficient, full screens, full keyboard, you
Yep.
know, it was a real easy thing to do.
Yep. So there's a lot of tools out there that can make this all go very effectively. We just have to look at also the cost as well. And if they can link into your van, your list and your database.
To go back to predictive dialer, it's predictive in the sense that it selects the people you're going to call.
It works off of a list that you provided. It's
Yeah,
all the setup ahead of time. And it's kind of, well, I hate to say it, but it's this is what the robocallers do.
mhm.
This is what they do. They use predictive dialers.
Yeah. I know.
And
I've been on phone banking, and
Yes.
the kind I don't like is where it calls, where the system makes the call, and you're always told to answer and start talking because they may have been waiting. Well, that is a robocall, and robocalls really turn people off.
yes,
And I didn't really want to be part of making robocalls. The kind
Right.
where you decide to hit the button and then it makes the call, that's a lot better. You're not making robocalls. You're
I think with the system, the last system I used was for the Malinowski campaign, you told it when you were ready to make the next call.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it was a definite improvement because I remember doing phone banking for, I think it was the race, the previous Senate race, the special Senate race with Reverend Warnock in Georgia. And that was a nightmare because I just wasn't prepared to talk to people and it just kept rolling and rolling. And
Right,
it was
right.
exactly as you described. It was very stressful.
Yeah.
But
And you realize
The
that
next time it was better. So I think they learned it within a year not to do that.
realize after a while that you're doing the robocalling that you so much dislike.
Exactly. And that's where I think most of the systems that were doing that have caught up and realized that you can't get volunteers who want to sign up for it. And it is much more invasive and not and unwelcomed by the people you're calling.
Alrighty. So here is where we kind of start summing things up. So the highlighted numbers are the numbers we're actually going to use. For instance, tier 1, we're going to use all phones, right? We're not going to take any out. Whereas for for the phone bank, and then for unwalkables, right? We're not using all the doors. We're using minus the unwalkables for the lit drops. Tier 2, we're using all the phones and all the mailboxes for text banks and postcards. For canvassing and lit drops, we're taking out the unwalkables. I won't go through all of them, but that's what all the highlighted numbers mean. Good so far? Because I'm going to hit you with a lot of numbers. You don't have to really dive in and look at each number. It's really how it's arranged that's the key. So for tier 1, you have lit drop, you have phone bank, you have text bank. Now, phone bank, since you can't get everybody on the first shot, you're going to have multiple passes. And the thing to look at really is volunteer shifts and hours, because that's going to start moving into your budget. Total cost for lit drop will go into your budget. Text bank, the shifts, the hours will go into your budget. Tier 2, remember we said we'd canvas. Not going to get everybody on the first shot, so let's do 2 shots. Well, that's how many shifts and how many hours. Lit drop, same thing. Or we'll do the lit drop. These will be lit drops for folks that aren't home for each pass. So there's a cost to that. It's a cost to the postcards. Same with the text banking. Again, the shifts and the hours. Dollars for the lit drop, dollars for the postcard, shifts and total hours for the predictive dial. Shifts and hours for the canvas, dollars for the lit drop, dollars for the postcards, and shifts and hours for the predictive dial. And then other, remember the unwalkables, postcards and envelopes. Now, you may also want to do some special mailers, young voters we talked about, segment them out. Special mailers to support the goals, whichever goals you've set up. Like in our case, we said women in tier 2, women in tier 5. Maybe there's a special mailer that goes out. And then there's one that I've started looking into, is a mailer to tier 1s who live with tier 3s to encourage them to get the tier 3s to come out to vote. There's actually 90 of them in Ward 4. So I think it might be a worthwhile exercise.
That would also fall under a strategy, right? And
Yep.
so if I would say that's a nice to have, but that's a really specific message that might be very effective, especially if how well you know your town and your districts.
Yep. So now, as we figure out the cost, I apologize. There is a shift column I should have had. I have it at the very end when we total them up, but I should have a shift column. So canvas, 118 volunteer hours, lit drops, about $900, phone banks, about about 50 volunteer hours, text bank, another 75, postcards, another $500, another 75 hours for dialing, and another $100 for envelopes. This is all, not real costs. I'm just trying to, take these as examples. Right? And so the strategy drives the budget. So your total volunteer shifts you would need is 126. In Ward 4, so this is just in Ward 4 in Roxbury. We got 3 other wards. So if we embrace this strategy, we would have to find 126 3-hour shifts. The cost, obviously my costs aren't right, but let's say they were, it would cost us $1,500 for Ward 4. What isn't included is whatever service you pay for the phone bank or the predictive dialer or the text bank, or if you pay for your canvassing volunteers. So they have to be accounted for. So that's the strategy driving the budget. Well, sometimes the budget drives the strategy. Can our budget in terms of people and dollars support that strategy? Maybe there's some trade-offs. Maybe if we had more money than people, maybe we do postcards rather than canvassing. If we have more people than money, maybe we do phone bank instead of postcards. So you start trading off on what you're going to do based on what your budget and your volunteers will allow. We good on that? Then the next thing that tiering allows you to do is to schedule. So I just gave one example for canvassing. Is let's say, starting the 22nd, we start canvassing each weekend. That gives us 16 weekends. We saw earlier that we're going to need 40 shifts to canvass everybody we want to canvass. So that's 20 canvassers, 20 drivers. Or 20 shifts of canvas, 20 shifts of driving, right? Let's say you have 10 volunteers. It's 4 shifts per volunteer. So you can start putting a schedule together, right? You have your volunteers and you say, all right, obviously this goes way out to the right. I've got it only through the 30th of July, but you say, okay, we'll do 1 shift each this weekend. So I need a canvasser and a driver. We'll do 2 the second weekend, the second day. So the first is the 22nd of July. The second is the Sunday, right? I need 2 canvassers, 2 drivers, right? Right now, this canvasser does not have a driver, so somebody would have to sign up. For Saturday, the 29th, I need 1 canvasser, 1 driver. So far, nobody signed up. 30th, right now I have 1 canvasser. So you can start scheduling this out and then see where the gaps are and see if you have enough people to do this and if you need to supplement them. And you could do the same for phone banking. You could do the same for text banking. You could do the same for the lit drops. So now because you tiered it and you were able to come up with these numbers, now you can set your schedule in advance and try to see, all right, when's my busy weekends? When not? When don't I have people? Do I have to move things around? Maybe I can't do as many lit drops because I don't have enough people. Okay, fine. Well, what are we going to substitute? If we still want to do 3 contacts, maybe we don't do 3 contacts. Maybe for tier 5, we only do 2 contacts. Or maybe for tier 4, we only do 2 contacts. See, now you can start playing with the numbers to fit reality, to fit the money you have and the people you have. Does that make sense? Silence is either a really good thing or I lost people 3 slides ago.
Your,
I think
Perfect sense.
Or some of them are Yankees fans.
I had put in the chat that the people listed were members of the 1969.
Oh man, I
Mets.
wanted to see if people guessed it. Oh,
I didn't guess it.
I wanted to see if anybody could pick it out. Oh,
your figures, like for costs and volunteers and budget, are they for the whole campaign or are they for some time period?
They would be for the whole campaign. I only have this through the 30th because I couldn't fit enough on a slide.
Well, that's all right. I just wanted to understand.
But I think
Yeah.
the idea is to just, this is a way to plan your budget for your whatever campaign you have. Right? If you only want to do stuff from September on, you would adjust accordingly. Right?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you need to know how many volunteer hours you're going to need, or how many volunteer shifts you're going to need, and how much for material and services.
And also, you might have your campaign coordinating with other campaigns for specific times.
Well, if
Exactly.
you have this scheduled out and they say, hey, we're thinking of coming in on the 30th, we're like, hey, funny you should say that. I have one person going out. Give me some, or either give me some of your material, and that person could distribute your material while distributing our material. Now all
Or
of a sudden we can get
give
more
me
efficient.
some of your people.
Well, that's even better. That's as long as we can build the turfs. So in summary, when is something you aim for, right? It gives you something to shoot for. A goal are the steps to get you there, and now tiers are a way to organize your efforts to get you toward that win number.
So, thanks for doing this. A lot of
And then-
help, a lot of
Oh, thank
analysis.
you. But this is the most important slide right here. Remember, analytics get you to the voter's door. Analytics get you to voters' mailbox. Analytics get you to the voter's phone. But it's your message that gets the voter to the polls. That's the key. That's the thing Dave always harps on,
Absolutely.
right? It's the message. If you're gonna, if one of your goals is women in unaffiliated women, well, get a message that they'll respond to, whatever that is. Or if it's an age group, what do they respond to? So this is the slide to walk away with.
The
Hey, Mike.
analytics tells you who to give the message to.
I have a question regarding analytics and numbers. Do we have any numbers on? I know by age group, we talked about the fact that text messaging for the 18 to 25 or whatever that group was. But do we have any analytics on what type of contact gets the best response to get people out?
From what I've read, it's canvassing.
Yeah, for people
that-
to people, but a quick question again about the cost of text messaging. So I remember them being very like was relatively costly because you could go do it so quickly. Is it you're saying that that it's come down in price, or
No,
that
I'm saying that these numbers are for demonstration purposes
no,
only.
no. I meant
Oh, okay.
And I thought when Anne
Oh,
was
all right.
saying about getting a no, I know yours.
We don't know what the cost will be, but the idea is that it will be cheaper if we do it that way than if we were to go out and sign a contract.
Right, like
to
anything,
do-
bulk buying, you're
Yeah.
trying to,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so important to coordinate something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause
and we were begging for this in 2019 and 2021, and we couldn't get it. So
Yeah,
I am encouraged that this is the direction that the county is going in.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, just for bang for buck, whatever, it just seems like,
It might be easier for the county to make that kind of decision, by the way. And George, this is something that if you can bring it up when you talk to them tomorrow, is if they get sign off from towns or campaigns, yes, we will participate. Almost kind of like pledge. Yes, if you buy the big contract, we will be there. We will show up. We
That's a
will
good
pay
idea.
our share.
Okay, that's a good idea. I'll suggest that.
Yeah, and mention it that we talked about it in this, and that it'll be in the slides, and it'll be, not that we're signing the county up, but we are encouraging that these things be used.
but there's also a problem of you don't want to overuse anything. They become so cheap that you're just sending out, again, being more of a spam.
Oh, yeah, no,
thing.
you don't
So-
want to
so you'd have
spam
be-
people.
Yeah, that's the other
Right,
thing.
and I think that is what James was saying, at some point it becomes,
Harassment,
unwelcomed.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
you want
unwelcome.
a specific message, right? You want to
Right.
target it toward whoever with a
Yeah,
given
sometimes
message.
it's did you, vote, you might want to send a text to all of the people who have signed up for vote by mail. Ballots should be hitting your mailboxes within the week. Make your plan to return it as soon as
Right, yeah,
possible.
yeah.
You know, something like that, right? And we can cut a list of people to text because we can check in Van that they are vote by mail voters.
And you can check if they've already voted, so,
And we can check and we take them off if they've already
Yeah.
voted.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
so,
good cycle, yeah.
and actually that's part of the messaging you send to somebody who votes by mail. The sooner you get your ballot in, the sooner you get off all of our lists.
Right.
Right. All the campaigns, they refresh or should refresh their list. You don't get canvassed, you don't get called, they don't waste their mailer on you. I will say that that's something that a certain congressman of the unsavory type, he was wasting mail left and right because Nicholas and I in our household had already voted. And we were still getting mail.
How'd you
Well,
get on
just-
their list?
Nicholas did, because
Ah.
he's an unaffiliated who always votes Democrat, but they don't know that.
Okay.
I
So-
remember, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Sure. I remember several years ago, some professional campaign manager, when questioned about hitting people too often or annoying them by the volume of literature, amount of calls, said, no, you have to make repeated calls, like at least 12 calls per voter,
Yeah.
12 hits per voter. You've got to get them out because they may find it annoying, but it reminds them to vote. What is your reaction to that?
The best practices that I've heard, again, going all the way up to the DNC and their training and stuff, is you want to try to hit people at least, 3 to 4 times.
Yeah, because he mentioned about a dozen.
No, that is harassment. And frankly, that's expensive. And I don't know how a campaign can justify that because I don't know if there's any statistic that would back up that that's effective. They're better off making sure that they've got people who are canvassing or doing lit drops, that are targeted, right? Paying for really good printing and good advertising. That's a better bang for your buck. What is not mentioned in any of this, by the way, and that's because it's well beyond our purview and requires a different kind of expertise, is using data in Van to do social media outreach.
Yeah.
We didn't touch on that. We're not going to touch on that in this, but understand that that is the big step that we're all going to be moving towards at some point, is to get like a social media director. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
Absolutely.
big thing that's coming,
Especially
And-
for the kids, yeah.
especially with younger people.
Yeah.
And it's not just any media. It's not just the ones that maybe most of us are familiar with is Facebook, but it would be using multiple platforms.
I say quill and parchment.
But
Do
that's a skill set. That's a different skill set.
Yes, it is.
we ever try to merge data in Van with data from other sources?
You can't.
Data from Van comes from multiple sources. Van, the whole database behind Vote Builder that's in Van is actually compiled from the voter history data, the voter data from the state, the Secretary of State, those uploads, and then it goes through its own analytics and processing, because it then gets a lot of data and runs that data against things. So it checks address, it checks death records, it does a lot of, we'll call it massaging of the data. And that's what the tool of Van does.
So the most aggravating thing was how inaccurate, people moving all the time. People
Absolutely.
getting aggravated that they're especially families with
And to that end, right. And so when you would go through some stuff and you'd have your list and you go to a house and they said, this person hasn't lived here. My daughter moved away. Well, their daughter never changed her voter registration. That's not on us. That's on the person
right.
who no longer lives there. That's their responsibility. In fact, the people still at the house can't change the voter registration information for the person who moved out. And that's a frustrating thing. And I think what we need is when we send canvassers out and they get met with that angry frustration, just then here's the form or here's the
Right,
QR
yeah.
code, send that link to your person.
Yeah, I had to
and
do
tell
it for
them to
Kevin.
please
My
update.
son, I changed this.
Right.
Yeah, but,
Cheryl had put in the chat, that's one reason why we need to honor Dave's rules about sharing van data. It is governed by our license to the data. And that is a very important thing too. So van is far from perfect. We've used it now for, it's going on, you know, what is it? 6-7 years now, from within a Roxbury standpoint. And it has gotten better. I think it has gotten much more detail oriented. And I believe it has gotten more effective in that they're getting more updates. It used to be there were only a few updates a year, and during a campaign cycle, they may have gotten 2 or 3 updates between the primary and the election. Now it's almost every other week.
Yeah, I
That
could
in
tell that when I
itself
ran
is-
my queries. The numbers
Right,
kept
and
changing.
that in itself is light years
Yeah.
ahead of where we were just 2 years ago.
Well, if you've collected data, I know Van has different sources and they compile them, but you may collect data locally that's not collected by Van. What do? Do you just manually enter it into Van, or can you merge lists, or what?
You can't really enter data into Van other than you are limited that if you wanted to update some stuff on voters, like specific voters that you know about or have data, you can't upload things into the Van database. We don't have that accessibility. But what you can do is that's when you make the decision as to how do you want to, save your list. You can export them. You have to get permission to, down and save your list. And then maybe you just work off of a spreadsheet or a local database of your own, and then you can
file.
Yeah.
And
But
work
just
with-
keeping in mind that you are now, you've cut off the access to any updates. If somebody has moved, if they've died, if they've voted already, if they've done, if they've already been contacted by another campaign or your own,
Right.
that kind of thing. You don't have access to any of that now. Or you have to manually look it up and then update it yourself.
So, and
It's not impossible, just understand the pros and cons of doing that kind of localized organizing.
In other words, if you have other information you have access to, you simply maintain a separate file.
You might want to, and then
Integrate your operations, but not your databases.
exactly. This way you at least have some confidence that you have the most accurate, up-to-date data possible, because that's really so important during a campaign.
And you don't want bad data being entered into Van.
Oh, no.
I've always been
So,
afraid.
right. I mean, there's the one thing that we are not allowed to do, and yet they haven't removed the button that lets you do it. And that we absolutely nobody anywhere should be marking someone as deceased. And yet it's still an option. I don't know why they haven't turned it off.
And apparently so difficult to undo, to bring you
Yes.
back to life.
So
Oh.
something like that. So this is where Van is really good, but then every now and then there's something that it's really got to improve on.
But are we able to update things like phone number and email? I thought we
I
could.
believe so.
So I did it recently. I could go back and check the person that I updated it, but I think
Yeah.
it's,
Okay,
have to
so
do
I
it
mean,
once.
But I
You can.
believe so because they
I
want.
do that all the time.
Okay.
If I have an updated number, or
Yes.
if I have an updated phone number or email, but then I do specify, if I'm given that, it's for my eyes only. You can specify this is to be used only for you, or it can be used in Van. There's a
Right.
note.
Okay. No,
like,
but
there's a toggle down.
that's good, right?
Margaret, you're saying you can do that within Van?
Yeah. Yeah, let me pull in Van now. Let me go in.
So I think these are some things
go-
that we can confirm, but I've
Yeah.
always understood that if
I'm
you
just
had an
gonna go to
updated
quick
email,
lookup.
We can talk about that offline if you'd rather, but that's very interesting to me.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll just put myself in and just pull up.
It's 9:03, guys.
I know. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna try to wrap this. Does anybody else have any other questions? So otherwise, if we're good with the questions, and I think just keep in mind that everybody is on the email list, and the video, I will stop recording in a moment, will be will be uploaded to the Morris County Democratic Committee's YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that so that you always kind of know, or you'll see if you go to YouTube, it'll have a little indicator that it'll say, hey, there's a new video for you to see. And we will update the slides a little bit based on the feedback from tonight, and we can send that out upon request. I'm not going to send it to everybody, but if you'd like an updated copy of the slides, you can, and they will also be updated in the Vandals Facebook page. And Mike, great job again. There's still cupcakes.
Thank you, Mike.
I get my cupcake now.
But thank you very much for everybody who
thank
came.
you.
And I know there are people who were planning on coming, but they were at the other meeting, and so they missed out on all of this. So thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you both. Thank you,
All right.
Anne. Thank you, Mike. This was
welcome.
wonderful as always.
All right. So if you have any questions you think of later, just let us know. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Hey, Annie,